All right, I believe we should start. Many thanks to everyone who is attending, both online but also here in Strasbourg. My name is Georgi. I represent the Cybercrime Division of the Council of Europe, and first of all, would like to start with many thanks to EuroDIG for not just hosting this excellent conference at the Council of Europe, but also for allowing our proposal for the particular topic that we're going to discuss for the next 20-25 minutes to be part of the program, and that is the topic of non-consensual dissemination of intimate images. So we have very little time to cover a lot of ground, so I'm just we'll be being conscious of that. I would like to give floor back to the online moderators to introduce us to the rules of the session, then we'll just start to speak and discuss this concept.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome on today's session. Before we begin, I'd like to quickly go over a few session rules. Please enter with your full name. To ask a question, raise hand using the Zoom function. You will be unmuted when the floor is given to you. When speaking, switch on the video, state your name and affiliation. Do not share the links to the Zoom meetings, not even with your colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brief, concise, to the point, as we like it. Also to the point. So again, due to limited time, there will be only 2 speakers on this session. And it is my pleasure to introduce Elif Seraydin from Grevio, from the group of experts on action against violence against women and domestic violence. Apologies if I miss any of the particular elements there. But anyways, Elif will introduce us to the concept of non-consensual dissemination of intimate images, and I will follow up with a little bit of, let's say, what we call cybercrime flavor on that one. And then we will turn the floor over to you for questions and discussions, because we believe this is the most valuable part. So without further ado, Elif, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, everyone, for your interest in our session. And thanks to EuroDIG for hosting us. As my colleague mentioned, my name is Elif Seraydin. I work as an administrator at the monitoring mechanism of the Istanbul Convention, which for those who may not know, it is the Council of Europe's Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women. I will try to very briefly explain how this framework addresses non-consensual sharing of intimate images, NCDII, as well as the practical challenges we are observing when we are monitoring the implementation of the convention among its parties, which are currently 38 member states of the Council of Europe, plus the European Union as a union, which acceded to the Istanbul Convention. I would like to start by highlighting why it's so important to address NCDII. This is a very serious but often overlooked problem. For example, a 2023 study from Portugal reveals that 16% of the respondents have experienced some form of NCDII. And these numbers are increasingly rising. Again, from another country, numbers, the UK's revenge porn helpline reported an almost 21% increase between 2023 and 2024 of the reports that was brought to their attention. And in the majority of the cases, and I'm talking about 97% of the cases, the victims were women, and 81% of the perpetrators were men. So it is clearly a very gendered problem. And how does the Istanbul Convention respond to this? So the Convention offers a legally binding framework for addressing violence against women, which includes online and technology-facilitated violence. And in fact, the Convention's application to this form of violence has been clarified by Grevio, which, as my colleague mentioned, is the monitoring body for the Convention, in its general recommendation number 1. So under this framework, NCDII is categorized as image-based abuse and is treated as a form of sexual harassment under Article 40 of the Convention. The general recommendation I just mentioned defines image-based abuse as a perpetrator obtaining sexually explicit images or videos in the course of a relationship, or hacking or stealing them from the victim's computer, social media accounts, or phone to share them online. And there are various definitions of this NCDII phenomenon. This is the definition adopted by Grevio. And in its monitoring work, Grevio regularly looks into different forms of online and technology-facilitated violence. And these evaluations show that NCDII in particular, and especially among young people, has reached alarming, almost epidemic levels. And from these evaluations, certain common challenges stand out, which I would like to share with you. First, NCDII is often not properly criminalized. Although we are seeing a positive trend where more and more countries are introducing specific offenses in their criminal codes to combat NCAI, still, in many cases, it is addressed by general laws, for example, under threat, extortion, privacy breaches, and unfortunately, these general offenses do not usually reflect the dynamics and harm of NCAI. Second, even when there are specific laws, they're not used effectively. Prosecution rates are low, conviction rates are even lower. One reason for that is image-based abuse is often not taken seriously by police or other justice professionals. And this is mainly due to a lack of mandatory training. Grievous evaluations reveal that even the broader topic of violence against women is not properly integrated into professional training programs, and online and technology facilitated abuse is even more overlooked. What is also missing in professional training is trauma-informed responses, which increase the risk of re-traumatization for the victims. When there are special law enforcement units exist who may have the necessary gender-sensitive and trauma-informed response, then they lack the technical resources to collect digital evidence in such cases. On the other hand, when there are cybercrime units who have the technical skills and expertise, they lack the gender-sensitive approach. Third, even when someone is convicted, the harmful content often stays online, and in some cases, the perpetrators is even not asked to remove the content from their devices. And what we consistently hear in grievous evaluations from victims is that before anything else, before prosecution, before convictions, victims want the harmful content to be removed. As long as it's still available out there, even online or someone else's device, the fear and trauma remain very real for the victims. Another issue, and maybe the last one that I will mention, is that there aren't enough protection and support services available for victims. And the services that do exist, for example, domestic violence shelters, often don't have the resources to deal with NCDII. And this is especially worrying because in the majority of the cases, NCDII is committed by intimate partners or spouses. Again, in our evaluations, shelter representatives tell us that many victims are either threatened with NCDII to prevent them from leaving the perpetrator, or their intimate images are shared as a revenge after breakup. And in the current climate, these services that cater to victims, they are underfunded and understaffed, which makes it even harder for them to guide the victims through legal process. And because of all the shortcomings I mentioned in the criminal justice system, and especially procedural shortcomings, there is great potential for synergies between the Istanbul Convention and the Budapest Convention, which I think we will be able to explore more after my colleague's intervention.
Great, thank you very much, Elif. Again, many thanks for dealing with a very difficult concept, like in as short as possible. And I will try to match that also from a perspective of the cybercrime community, I would say. I mean, I'm not speaking on behalf, of course, of the cybercrime division or the cybercrime convention committee. I'm speaking in my personal capacity, but I still consider myself as part of a cybercrime community because I'm a cybercrime guy and working in this field for many, many years already. So there are three main messages I would like to send, and I'll be very, very brief. One message is that from a perspective of the cybercrime community, the NCDII is a criminal justice phenomenon. I mean, it's not exclusively, of course, criminal justice phenomenon. Of course, there are societal issues. There is a protection, for example, prevention aspects that criminal justice can never cover. And this is where the work of GREVI actually comes in, very much complementary, but also, guiding in terms of the cybercrime action. But all in all, this is a criminal offense. And the criminal justice, there is no alternative to criminal justice when it comes to justice for victims, but also for the possibilities, for example, to remove the content, because if criminal groups and criminals are still out there, and if they're still in possession of the material, I mean, you can as much assume that that material is going to be maybe eventually published or published in some other way, or continue to be misused against the victims as such. So when it comes to definition, the criminal justice definition of the non-consensual dissemination of intimate images, you cannot find it in the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime, you cannot find it in the Council of Europe Convention, but you can find it in the UN Convention on Cybercrime. And this is exactly where I would like to send the second message, which is complementarity between the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime, the European standard, I would say, but also global standard. Eventually, and also the UN standard, which was introduced very, very recently, and it's still there. The convention has been not yet open for signature, but it's going to be done very soon. So UN Convention, in its Article 16, provides a clear definition of the non-consensual dissemination of intimate images, and our message as a cybercrime community to everyone is also to try as quickly as possible to sign, ratify, and implement especially this provision, because again, it will complement very nicely the rest of the cybercrime offenses that are provided in the UN Treaty or in the Budapest Convention to the choice of the countries. Of course, the definition from my personal, let's say, assessment is not ideal. For example, one of the possibilities to, let's say, to require the intent to cause harm is let's say, it's a compromise solution, because you can imagine that it was a very difficult negotiation with many countries opposing the concept entirely as such. But of course, again, it's a compromise solution, but it's better than nothing. So there is at least a cybercrime standard and a provision which is available out there. And the third message I would like to send is that there is still a lot of potential into what Elif referred to as cybercrime units, and in general the cybercrime community, and also the community working with protection of women, girls, and also minors against domestic violence, sexual exploitation, and similar topics, to work together in terms of investigation, prosecution, and international cooperation when it comes to this. Because NCDII as cybercrime is going to be in the foreseeable future a very international form of crime. You need not only domestic powers that are available, for example, on the Budapest Convention or the UN Convention to investigate and produce electronic evidence, you would also need to cooperate more often than not. And you need to cooperate not just between the states, but for example, from state authorities to service providers, Meta, Facebook, /X, and others. So basically, it's a very important part of criminal justice approach to the problem that is actually important, but is going to be even more important once the UN Convention comes into force, to ensure that there is a formal cooperation between the states, but also between the states and the private entities on investigating and suppressing NCDII. This is in a nutshell, I mean, very shortly about what we both of us wanted to say about this topic, and we believe there is again a great value in discussion. So with the help of online moderators, I would like maybe to turn over the floor to the audience for any questions, and we'll try to collect maybe a few and answer to them in batches, if possible. So do we have, by the way, any questions from the online? Not yet. Any questions from the floor or any comments? Yes, please.
Hello. Thank you for the very interesting and informative presentation. I'm Sabaita Zaneli, and I'm here with EuroDIG. Yesterday, one of the parliamentaries was mentioning also a very important issue, the misuse of AI to generate images that was putting women politicians in very difficult situations. And my answer was my question is, how do you think that now the use of AI and with all the developments that we're seeing every day can also further complicate the situation in the issues that you just mentioned?
Yeah, in fact, we're already seeing how it is complicating it, and it's not just women in public eye are affected by deep fakes. It's regular, everyday women are also victimized by it, again, among young people especially, and it is so easy to access such software that generates these images. It is getting easier, and even when the service providers ensure us and the international community that there are safeguards in place, it is really, there's nothing that prevents underage people or women in public eye from being victimized by it. For us, from the point of this viewpoint of the Istanbul Convention, this is still NCDII. No matter who produced the image, is it real or fake, it's still treated as the same and should be treated as the same. But again, what we are seeing is that on one hand, NCDII is not taken seriously at all. It's usually faced with victim blaming attitudes by the professionals. And when the images are fake, they're not even considered as something that could cause harm. This is from our point of view, we are seeing that there is still not enough understanding that this could be a very traumatizing and very violating experience for victims.
Thank you. If I may, I can also add from the perspective of the cybercrime community and cybercrime convention committee, because of course the matter of AI being a high technological one does not escape the attention of the committee that deals with the problems of cybercrime. So we have recently started the working group which actually looks into the matter of AI, not in relation just to NCDII, but also overall any cybercrime. But here we have to also understand that, I mean, the very long-standing principle under the Budapest Convention and also in general of the action on cybercrime and electronic evidence has been technological neutrality. So we understand that technology can be used both ways, and we see both negative but also positive uses of AI. For example, from the positive side, increasingly the units that we're working with, the forensic people that we're working with, they're also, or especially the ones that deal with, for example, open source intelligence, which is extremely important in cases of abuse. They are using the AI tools to actually facilitate the identification of perpetrators, finding electronic evidence, producing actually admissible electronic evidence, and this is where we see the positive uses. But of course, negativity is also there, and negative, let's say, connotations in terms of possibilities that AI and machine learning accords to, let's say, more abuse happening and generation of images, for example, or videos even in that regard. So there is definitely work ongoing there, but again, my assumption is that the committee will continue to treat this as a technologically neutral manner, analyzing both sides of it and contributing to both, let's say, in terms of additional, for example, capacities for law enforcement to use AI in terms of investigations, prosecution, and suppression. Yes, please.
Just a quick follow-up. In terms of when AI is involved, the issue of accountability also becomes a bit more complicated because, like you were mentioning before, it's very important the prosecution and following up in the real world with finding who are the perpetrators. But when it comes to AI, who is to blame? The person that generated or also the platform that allowed that this content was generated in their platform? So I would like to see your opinion on that as well. Sorry.
It's not really an opinion, it's just an update, and maybe the cybercrime community should also keep an eye on it. The Council of Europe is actually currently developing a Committee of the Ministers recommendation on exactly the accountability of perpetrators and service providers on combating online and technology-facilitated violence against women. And the deepfakes, but also NCDII in general, is also covered. It will not be adopted before next year, but this accountability issue and this two-headed accountability issue is something on the radar of the Council of Europe.
Thank you very much, Elif. Nothing really to add here, but just one element, because when we speak about cybercrime, it's about the criminal justice. So we're speaking relatively about criminal justice responsibility from our side. And from that side, of course, I mean, it just boils down to individual responsibility, but also legal responsibility of companies, which is provided, for example, under the Budapest Convention. So it will be interpreted in that way, but of course, also in line with the Council of Europe, Council of Ministers decision that will be handed down. Yes, please, and also note if there are any online questions.
Hi, my name is Francis. I'm also from EuroDIG. I had a question about accountability because, of course, it's quite hard to trace the line of responsibility. You have the person who generates it or sources it somehow, whether it's real or fake. Maybe they post it to an online source. If that gets taken down, how can you stop people, say, downloading things to their camera roll, which is private and harder to access, or circulating these images on things like WhatsApps, which are end-to-end encrypted? And then the idea is, if someone comes to have this image, they didn't generate it, they didn't source it themselves as the first primary individual, but now they've got hold of this image, they don't necessarily know if it's, it's been consensually generated or provided. Like, how do we view these intermediary individuals who circulate sexually explicit content, who didn't necessarily generate it in the first place? Is there a sort of accountability metric for people who continue to share these images and thus, keeping on this trauma and this pain for the victim at hand? And yeah, how can we treat these individuals as opposed to the past people who initially circulated?
Again, my answers are purely, again, along the lines of criminal justice, and that is a limiting factor. I understand that may be a bit of frustration also in terms of the expected responses, but at the same time, when it comes to, let's say, the origin of the images or the knowledge of the persons, let's say, criminalization, as it's currently available, for example, under the UN Convention of NCDII, does not really do a lot of differentiation there. So as soon as you are distributing knowingly, with intent, the material that is of abusive nature, let's say, then you're looking at a criminal offense. And the states have the obligation, actually, under the UN Convention to criminalize it. So it's like black and white, let's say, obligation, positive obligation of the states to establish this as criminal offenses. It falls within the margin of appreciation of the states how we're dealing with the issue. So if they want to, for example, provide further gradation, to have some aggravating circumstances if necessary, and to provide some other, let's say, for example, one thing that I mentioned is paragraph 5 of Article 16 of the UN Convention, which in my opinion is a weakness in terms of that you have to demonstrate intent to cause harm, which is going to, of course, complicate then the criminal justice process in terms of like simply proving the intent, because this is something that I'm a foreign prosecutor myself, and I know how difficult it is sometimes to prove the intent in criminal cases, especially in very clear terms. But again, I mean, from our perspective, like all kinds of the conduct that you mentioned is covered by criminalization as such. But again, I'm speaking only about the criminal justice side, so maybe Elif can add something from the side of protection, prevention, but it would be probably aligned.
Yes, it's a similar approach from the viewpoint of the Istanbul Convention, regardless of if there was consent or not for the production of the images. The moment they're distributed, it is a problem for the Istanbul Convention too. So the Istanbul Convention asks the states to address sexual harassment, but for that form of violence, it doesn't necessarily foresee criminal sanctions. States have a margin of appreciation to sanction it through non-criminal measures. And it's for a few forms of violence, I guess, stalking and sexual violence, sexual harassment, that is the case. Then again, the criminal justice responses are not always sufficient for that. But from our point of view, we are trying to, in our evaluation reports, raise awareness of the dangers and harm this can cause to young women and girls, and actually women of every age, and then pushing states to address it through prevention, protection, coordinated policies, and prosecution. And actually, we're seeing some movement in regards of this. Maybe there are also people who are aware of this, but in Denmark, I think in early 2020s, there was a major case where over 1,000 perpetrators for distributing an image, they were not the ones originally generated that image or obtained that image, they were just distributing it, and all of them were prosecuted. I believe, again, the majority of the perpetrators were underage, so maybe they're not necessarily faced with criminal sanctions, but it was a very good case showing that it is still possible, even in such a large-scale case, and it sent a very strong message to the society, we find.
Okay, thank you very much. I think in the interest of time, we may allow one more question if we have any online. No questions. Or yes, please, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Yegor Yaghmurov. I am from Ukrainian Ombudsman Office. The question is that given the context of the war in Ukraine and the widespread digitalization of communication, especially among displaced persons and women, which risks of this NCDII have been observed in the conflict and post-conflict settings globally, and what preventive tools and frameworks can be recommended in this case? Thank you.
I will just, maybe it's not a solution, but it's just an update on the status. So the Istanbul Convention continues to be applied in crisis situations, and which you mentioned, crisis situations such as war, unfortunately, or the COVID pandemic, it caused an increase in online and technology facilitated violence because of what the communication is boiled down to. So it is very interesting in the Ukrainian context, and actually currently Grevio is visiting Ukraine they're trying. There might be last-minute security requirements that might prevent them from entering the country. But the Grevio delegation is right now in at least trying to enter Ukraine to monitor the implementation of the Istanbul Convention in that. And it's going to be a very interesting report once it's out, looking exactly at what kind of prevention measures could be taken in this very, very unique context. So I don't have a proposal because it's a very unique approach. It's a very unique situation, but we will see the report within a year's time.
All right, I think that we can wrap it up here because we have less than 4 minutes for the next session, which will be happening in the same room. And I would encourage everyone to stay because we'll be speaking about the concept of war crimes and electronic evidence of war crimes. But many thanks for your questions and for your interest in this session. There will be probably no formal messages right now because it's a flash session, but I think it's fair to say that NCDII is in our mind. I mean, in terms of perspective from either Istanbul Convention, Budapest Convention, UN Convention, doesn't matter. I think it's a work for everyone to prevent, to prosecute, and to deal with this phenomenon. Many thanks for your interest, and see you at the next sessions. Best of luck with the rest of the EuroDIG.
Yes, it was the end of this session. And the next, as was stated, electronic evidence in wartime will be in the same room. And again, thanks to everyone online and offline who asked questions and contributed.